Let's hope Amy remembers that after today, she can finally stop eating for two. My mother-in-law delivered that line with her champagne flute raised like she was christening a ship at my baby shower, in my own backyard, in front of 50 guests, half of whom had known me since I wore braces. I was 34 weeks pregnant. I was wearing a floral dress I had genuinely loved that morning, and I was holding a glass of sparkling cider that I suddenly could not feel in my hand. Nobody laughed. A little boy over by the fence lowered his bubble wand, slowly, the way kids do when they can tell the adults have stopped pretending. Somebody's fork clinked down onto a plate and just stayed there. The paper napkin in my lap twisted between my fingers until it tore straight through the little stork printed on the corner, and Brenda wasn't finished. Maybe she can get back in the gym before Lucas is embarrassed to be seen with her. My husband stood up so fast his chair went over backward into the grass, and my mom, my quiet 5'2" retired kindergarten teacher mother, a woman who once waited out a room of 26 sugar-crashed 5-year-olds without raising her voice, did not yell. She didn't argue. She didn't even look angry, which honestly should have been Brenda's first warning. She touched Lucas's arm, said, "I'll handle this," walked to the gift table and picked up a small cedar box. What she did with that box took Brenda apart so cleanly, so quietly, that my mother-in-law left our home without another word. Not one. She has not commented on my body since. Not once, not in over a year. Let me back up. Because to understand what was inside that box, and why it worked when 3 years of politeness hadn't, you need to understand how we got to that garden in the first place. My name is Amy. I'm 32. I teach 10th grade biology, which means I spend my days explaining to teenagers why their bodies do the things they do, and my evenings grading lab reports where somebody has inevitably drawn the mitochondria wearing sunglasses. My husband Lucas is a civil engineer. He designs stormwater systems, which he describes as making sure water goes where it's told. We met in college, married 5 years ago, and started trying for a baby almost immediately. It took 3 years. If you've been through it, I don't have to explain. If you haven't, here's the shape of it. 3 years of appointments in beige waiting rooms. 3 years of injections Lucas learned to give me in the crease of my stomach because my hands shook too much to do it myself. 3 rounds of IUI that went nowhere. 1 round of IVF that ended in a phone call I took standing in the kitchen holding the counter. A 2nd round we almost couldn't afford. Negative tests lined up on the bathroom counter like little white tombstones. I cried in so many parking lots that I could rank them. The fertility clinic on Delaney Street had the worst one. No shade, no privacy, just you and your steering wheel and the receptionist watering the planters, pretending not to see you. Then, on a Tuesday morning in November at 5:40 a.m., there were 2 lines. I woke Lucas up by standing in the doorway making a sound that wasn't quite words. At the 8-week appointment, the ultrasound tech turned the screen toward us, and there it was. This furious little flicker, 162 beats per minute, galloping along like it had somewhere to be. Lucas squeezed my hand and forgot how to breathe. I mean that literally. The tech had to glance over and say, "Dad, you good?" We told my mom that night. She came over with a lasagna because she is constitutionally incapable of arriving anywhere without food. And when we showed her the ultrasound printout, she went completely still. Then she put her hand flat against my stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet, and whispered, "There you are." 3 words. I still can't think about it without my eyes stinging. My dad died 6 years ago. His heart, fast, on an ordinary Thursday. And since then, it had been mom on her own in the house I grew up in, volunteering at the library, teaching Sunday school, filling her days the way widows learn to. This baby wasn't just our miracle, it was hers too. Brenda had a different reaction. Let me introduce Brenda properly because Brenda would want to be introduced properly. Brenda Hartwell, Lucas's mother. 61 years old, widowed since Lucas was in college, and a real estate agent of some genuine local celebrity. 3-time regional top producer, her face on bus benches and grocery carts all over town. Always the same photo. Pearls, blazer, a smile calibrated to sell you a 4-bedroom colonial. She is impeccable. Her hair does not move. Her house looks permanently staged because in a sense it is. And she had been picking me apart, one manicured piece at a time, since the day Lucas proposed. At our engagement dinner, she looked at my hair. I'd just cut it to my chin and said, "Oh, well, it'll grow." By the wedding, I'd grown it out, and she asked if I'd given up on finding a style. My wedding dress, which I loved, which my mother and I found together on a day I'll remember forever, was, in Brenda's assessment, delivered to a table of her friends. Plain. But Amy's a plain kind of pretty, and that's fine. The comment I think about most came about a year into our marriage. We were at dinner, the 4 of us. Brenda brings her sister Diane places the way other people bring a purse, and I ordered dessert, 1 creme brulee. Brenda watched the ramekin land in front of me, smiled, and said, "Settling into marriage, I see." Here's the thing I noticed early, filed away, and talked myself out of for years. Brenda only did this to women. Lucas could gain 15 pounds, and she'd say he looked prosperous. His cousin's husband showed up to Thanksgiving in a stained sweatshirt, and Brenda called him comfortable in his own skin. But every woman who entered her orbit got measured, cataloged, and priced like a listing. I told myself it was generational. I told myself it was how she was raised. Lucas once mentioned, quietly, that his grandmother used to weigh Brenda every Sunday before church, and I filed that away too. An explanation is not a permission slip, but for 3 years, I let it function like one. "That's just Brenda," Lucas would say, wincing. "She thinks it's love, paying attention," and I'd laugh it off because that's what you do. You laugh it off right up until you're pregnant, and suddenly the thing she's paying attention to is the body your child is living in. We announced the pregnancy at Sunday dinner with the ultrasound photo in a little silver frame. Brenda cried, which surprised me. She hugged us both, held the frame at arm's length like an appraisal, and said it was the best news of her year. Then, still holding it, still smiling. And when do you plan to lose the hormone weight? Best to have a strategy early. It gets harder every year after 30. I laughed. I genuinely thought it was a joke. A bad one. An aunt at a wedding one. But a joke. It took me a few seconds to register that she was waiting for an actual answer. Her eyebrows up, her head tilted with real interest. I was 8 weeks pregnant. I had gained, at that point, nothing. We're mostly focused on, the baby, I said. Of course, Brenda said. But you'll thank me for mentioning it. That was the starting bell, though I didn't know it yet. What followed was 7 months of commentary delivered in a tone of gracious concern, at a rate of roughly 1 remark per meal. If I ate, someone's got an appetite. If I didn't, skipping meals affects the baby, When I mentioned at maybe 20 weeks that I'd started craving oranges, she said, better than what most women crave. Stay in the produce aisle. At a family lunch, she reached over and slid the bread basket 6 inches away from my plate. Not away from the table, just away from me. With the serenity of someone repositioning a vase. I rationalized every single instance. She's excited. She's nervous. She lost her husband young and controls what she can. This is how her mother loved her. Badly. And it's the only dialect she speaks. I built her a cathedral of excuses, and I want to be honest with you about why. Because she's Lucas's mom, because I was tired, and because saying something felt like starting a war I'd have to fight while growing a human. But denial has a shelf life, and mine expired on an ordinary Wednesday when I caught myself doing something that scared me. We were due at Brenda's for dinner at 6. At 4:30, I stood in my kitchen eating a bowl of cereal over the sink, quickly, mechanically, like I was getting away with something. And halfway through, I stopped, spoon in the air, because I suddenly understood what I was doing. I was eating in advance, so I could eat less in front of her, so there would be less for her to see, so my plate would be smaller than her commentary. I was 31 years old, 24 weeks pregnant, a literal biology teacher, a woman who stands in front of teenagers and explains that pregnancy increases blood volume by 50%, that the body in that state is running the most sophisticated construction project on Earth, and I was standing over my sink strategizing how to look like I needed less. My hands were not steady when I put the bowl down. I told Lucas that night. All of it. The cereal, the bread basket, the tally I'd apparently been keeping in some back room of my head. He went very quiet, and then he said, okay, that's not a quirk anymore. That's damage. And then he said the thing I'd been afraid to say, and it's working on you. I want to tell you about my 24-week appointment because it matters to what came later. My OB is Dr. Renata Okafor, 16 years in practice, maternal fetal medicine, the kind of doctor who reads your chart before she walks in and quizzes the residents in the hallway. She's brisk, precise, and funny in a way that sneaks up on you. That day, she went through everything, measurements, heartbeat, blood pressure, and announced, everything about this chart is boring, and boring is my favorite thing a chart can be. And I heard myself ask, in a small voice I did not recognize, but am I gaining too? I couldn't even finish it. I hated the sentence while it was still in my mouth. Dr. Okafor put the chart down. She looked at me for a second and then she asked, not unkindly, who told you that? And it all came out. The bread basket, the hormone weight strategy, shower cake counts. I sat on the crinkly paper of the exam table, 7 months pregnant, and cried in front of my doctor about my mother-in-law while a nurse named Kim silently handed me the tissue box like she'd done it 1,000 times because she probably had. Dr. Okafor let me finish. Then she said something I wrote down in my phone in the parking lot afterward, so I'd have it exactly. Here's how this works. Your body is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, and it is doing it well. I deal in data. Her opinion is not data. You are not required to enter it in the chart. I sent Lucas a photo of that note from the car. He texted back, framing this. Armed with an actual physician's actual assessment, I tried the reasonable thing, the naive thing. At the next dinner, when Brenda observed that I was really showing now, everywhere, I said brightly, Dr. Okafor says everything's right on track. She's very happy with us. Brenda smiled at me with real pity and said, doctors say what patients pay to hear. 16 years of maternal fetal medicine, dismissed over a pot roast. That was the moment I understood that no credential I could carry into her house would ever outrank her opinion of my body. Evidence wasn't the currency. I just didn't know yet what the currency was. My mother knew. She'd known for a while, but my mother plays a long game. If I had to pick the single worst moment before the shower itself, it was the dress. Brenda came by our house in April, just to drop something off. She does this, arrives unannounced with a gift bag, because a gift buys her admission and an audience. Inside the tissue paper was a wrap dress, silk, genuinely beautiful, size small, the tag still on it, $128. I'm not a size small. I wasn't before the pregnancy either. This was not a mistake. Brenda does not make mistakes with merchandise. There was a card, in her looping realtor's cursive, for when you're yourself again. I stood in my own entryway holding proof in writing that my mother-in-law considered the pregnant version of me, the version 3 years of needles and grief and hoping had finally built, to be a departure from myself, an off-brand Amy, a temporary listing. My hands went cold. That's the detail I remember, how cold my hands got in a warm house. Lucas walked her out to her car, and I watched through the window as my husband, a patient man, a man who diffuses public works meetings for a living, stood in our driveway driveway and finally said no to his mother. I couldn't hear the words. I could see his hands, palms down, level, like he was trying to physically lower the temperature of something. I could see Brenda's posture change when she realized he wasn't apologizing, and I could see her do the thing she does when cornered. Her chin crumpled, her hand went to her pearls, and she became instantly the victim of the conversation. She cried in our driveway. She drove away, dabbing her eyes at the wheel of her immaculate Lexus. By that evening, her sister Diane had texted Lucas, "I hope you're happy. Your mother is devastated. She only ever tries to help." That's the mechanism, by the way, in case you have a Brenda of your own. The cruelty is retail. The fragility is wholesale. She spends all day handing out little cuts, but the moment one is named out loud, she is the one bleeding, and the whole family is expected to gather around her. The dress went into the donation bin. I folded it carefully, which I resented myself for, and the failed confrontation taught us the second rule of Brenda. Direct pushback didn't just fail, it fed her. She metabolized it into martyrdom. Lucas held his boundary. He told her plainly that comments about my body needed to stop, and for about 3 weeks, she was frostily, theatrically wounded, and then she simply resumed, softer, in front of witnesses, in formats designed to be deniable. A joke, an observation, concern. You can't file a complaint against concern. 2 things kept me sane in the last stretch. Well, 2 professionals and 1 mother. The first was Dana Whitfield, a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in perinatal mental health. 12 years of sitting with pregnant women and new mothers, while their families audition for roles in the delivery room. Dr. Okafor's office referred me after the crying incident. I saw Dana by video every other Tuesday at 4:30 after my last class. Dana never once diagnosed Brenda from a distance, which I respected. She wasn't interested in Brenda at all, really. She was interested in the cereal bowl. "You've started auditing your plate through her eyes," she told me in our second session. "That's her audit. You keep volunteering to run it for her. What would it look like to hand it back?" We practiced actual sentences. Out loud. I felt ridiculous rehearsing dialogue like a school play, and I did it anyway. That comment doesn't work for me. I'm not discussing my body today. We drilled the pause, the flat, pleasant tone, the redirect. "You don't have to win the exchange," Dana kept saying. "You have to end it. Those are different skills." The second was Meredith Cole, the registered dietitian attached to the hospital's prenatal program. 20 years in, walls covered in thank you cards with footprints on them. I booked 1 session, honestly, as a fact-finding mission, because the science teacher in me wanted an expert witness. Meredith went through everything I actually ate and was gloriously unimpressed. "You're doing fine," she said. "Boringly fine." And then, when I told her about the shower cake still counts genre of commentary, she laughed and gave me the line I've since repeated to 2 of my own pregnant friends. Eating for 2 was never medical advice. Neither is performing hunger for an audience. Feed yourself and the baby, and let other people manage their own plates. So that was my armor going into June. A doctor's data, a therapist's scripts, a dietitian's blessing, and a husband who had already proven he'd tip a chair over for me. It should have been enough. It would not have been enough, because Brenda was saving her real work for an audience, and none of us, except one of us, had planned for that. My mom announced in early May that she was throwing the shower, and that she was throwing it at our house because our backyard was bigger and because, quote, "a baby should be celebrated where she's going to live." Mom's name is Margaret, but nobody has called her that since approximately 1974. Everyone calls her Midge. She's 70. She taught kindergarten for 34 years, and she has the specific superpower of women who have spent decades managing small, chaotic humans. Nothing rattles her, and she never telegraphs. She spent weeks on it. I mean, weeks. There were lists on legal pads. There was a wooden arch Lucas built to her exact sketch, and white roses she ordered from the florist, and supplemented with 2 armloads from the grocery store because the florist's roses are for looking, and these are for filling. There were little seed packets for every guest, tied in twine, with a tag she printed herself. "Love makes beautiful things grow." 3 weeks before the shower, she sent something to every guest. An email, plus a printed note tucked into the paper. Invitations for the older relatives. A request. "Write a letter to the baby," she asked. Advice, a family story, a promise, a recipe, anything. Seal it. Bring it. She'll read them when she's older, and she'll know exactly who was waiting for her. Every guest got it. I want to be precise about this because it matters later. Every single guest. I found out about the letters early because I'm nosy and Mom is bad at hiding legal pads. What I did not know about was the box. I saw it for the first time the morning of the shower, sitting on the gift table. A small cedar box, obviously old, obviously handmade, sanded and freshly oiled so the grain glowed. When I asked, Mom flapped a dish towel at me and said, "Ask me about it later," in the exact voice she used to use for "don't touch the cupcakes." I found out later that my dad built that box. 40 years ago, when they were dating and he was stationed 2 states away, he made it to hold her letters. Every letter she wrote him, 4 decades of paper, kept in cedar. After he died, she moved his letters into an album, and the box sat empty on her dresser for 6 years. Now she'd sanded it, oiled it, and given it a new job. The morning of the shower, I woke up at 6:50 to the sound of my mother already in my backyard, arguing gently with a folding table. It was June 13th, a Saturday, one of those overcast then perfect days. By 9, the arch was up, and Mom was pinning white roses into it, and I came out out in my pajamas with 2 coffees, and the baby, who by 34 weeks had firm opinions about my bladder and my ribs, chose that exact moment to roll and kick hard enough to visibly move my shirt. Mom saw it. She put down the roses, pressed both hands flat against my belly, and the baby, show off that she already was, kicked again, right into her grandmother's palm. And my mother laughed and cried at the same time, this helpless, hiccuping sound, standing under a wooden arch in her gardening clogs. "Oh," she said. "Oh, she's going to be trouble. Good. That's what the day was supposed to be. That's what it mostly was, and I want to hold on to that. 50 people who loved us. Tiny socks pinned to a ribbon like a tiny laundry line. My students' favorite bad joke printed on the trivia cards because my co-teacher helped Mom make them. Kids weaving through the tables chasing bubbles. My cousin Jess ran the games. My niece Poppy, who is 7 and takes all appointed duties with the gravity of a federal judge, stationed herself beside the gift table as its self-declared guard. The shower was supposed to be my one safe afternoon. Brenda arrived at 2:20, 20 minutes late, which for Brenda is a form of punctuation. Cream heels sinking into my lawn, a hat with the wingspan of a small aircraft. She stood at the edge of the patio and scanned the garden, the arch, the roses, the seed packets, with the expression of an appraiser finding water damage. "Midge certainly made an effort," she said. Then she scanned me, head to toe, one full pass. "That dress is brave." I'd bought the dress with Jess. Wrap style, big botanical print. And when I'd looked in the mirror that morning, I had thought, before I thought anything else, I look like a garden. I had loved it for 4 hours. "Brave?" I said. "Large prints are risky when someone's already carrying extra volume." She patted my arm. "But you've never been vain. It's one of your best qualities." "Mom," Lucas said in the warning register. Brenda shrugged, serene under the hat. "What?" "Amy knows I'm honest." And that's when my mother crossed the patio with the lemonade pitcher, absolutely mid-task, not even slowing down, and said pleasantly, "No, you just always share your opinion." She said it the way you'd note the weather, and she kept walking. Brenda's mouth opened, found nothing scheduled, and closed. Jess made a noise into her cup. I caught Dana Whitfield's voice in my head. "You don't have to win the exchange, you have to end it," and thought with something between awe and terror. My mother has been to a class none of us knew about. For a couple of hours, the party was perfect anyway. That's the thing I'd forgotten was possible. That joy, in sufficient quantity, can just outvote a person. We played the measuring game, the one where everybody cuts a length of ribbon guessing the circumference of the belly. Jess cut hers exactly right, held it up against me, and took a bow. Poppy cut hers approximately the length of a garden hose, so the baby has room. Everyone laughed. Brenda cut a length of ribbon long enough to wrap a refrigerator, laid it across her lap, smoothed it flat, and smiled at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Ribbon is deniable. I used my scripts. I'm proud of that. When she remarked over finger sandwiches that I was certainly eating comfortably, I said in Dana's flat, pleasant tone, "Yep," and turned back to my aunt's story about a cruise. Ending, not winning. It was working mostly, the way a paper towel works on a leak. Then, around 4, I caught her by the dessert table. The cake was lemon with cream cheese frosting from the bakery downtown, and it was, objectively, spectacular. I had taken one slice. Brenda materialized beside me, looked at the plate in my hand, and said, gently, for my own good, "You know shower cake still counts." Before I could deploy a single rehearsed word, Lucas reached over and took the plate right out of my hand. For one grotesque second, Brenda looked satisfied. Vindicated even, her son finally enlisted. Then he took an enormous bite, frosting on his lip, handed the plate back to me. "It's excellent," he said. Jess, 2 feet away, snorted into her napkin so hard she had to leave the dessert table. Brenda turned and walked back toward the patio, spine straight, hat level, and I remember thinking, and I wanted on the record that I thought it, she's going to make us pay for that. I should have known she was saving her worst for an audience. Deniability requires witnesses. That's the part I hadn't understood. I'd been treating her comments as leaks, but they were rehearsals. Around sunset, the garden went gold. The kids' bubbles kept drifting through the light. Mom tapped her glass with a cake fork, and the tables quieted, and she said, "Before we lose the light, let's finish with a few words for Amy, Lucas, and the baby." Brenda stood up before my mother had finished the sentence. Her chair scraped across the patio stones, this long, ugly sound, and 50 faces turned. "I'll begin," Brenda said. She raised her glass high into the golden light and gave it a little twist so it caught. She'd dressed for this exact shot. I understand that now. "To my grandchild," she said, "may she inherit my son's intelligence, his common sense, and, if we're lucky, his metabolism." A ripple went through the seats. Not laughter. The other thing. Chairs shifting, eyes finding other eyes. Then she looked straight at me, and her voice went up half a step, bright and carrying, a voice trained by 2 decades of open houses. "And let's hope Amy remembers that after today, she can finally stop eating for 2. Nobody laughed. The silence had texture. The little boy by the fence, my co-teacher's son, 5 years old, mid-bubble, lowered his wand and looked at his mother to find out what was happening. Someone's fork clinked onto a plate. My napkin twisted in my fingers until it tore, and I looked down at the 2 halves of the stork and thought absurdly that I should apologize to it. And Brenda, reading the silence as suspense rather than horror, kept going. Maybe she can get back in the gym before Lucas is embarrassed to be seen with her. The whole garden stopped. I felt 50 people not looking at me, which is somehow so much louder than being looked at. My face was hot. My hands had gone cold again. Cold in June, and the baby rolled. This long, slow slow sweep, like she was turning over to hear better, and I put my hand on her, on us, and I remember one clear thought cutting through the roar. You will never know a single afternoon like this one. I won't allow it. Lucas stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward into the grass. That's enough. It was a joke, Brenda said, with the injured innocence already loading behind her eyes. It was cruel. The whole machinery was right there, ready to run, her chin beginning its crumple, Diane already half rising, the martyrdom warming up like an engine. In 4 seconds, she would be the one wronged. The shower would end as the day Lucas humiliated his mother. The story would be laundered by Christmas. My mom touched Lucas's arm. I'll handle this, she said. She didn't walk toward Brenda. That was the first strange thing, the thing that made the whole garden lean without moving. She walked away from her, to the gift table, past Poppy the guard, and came back carrying the cedar box. She set it down on the head table where everyone could see it, untied the ribbon, lifted the lid. We have one last tradition, she said, to everyone. Inside were envelopes. Dozens and dozens of envelopes, packed upright like a card catalog. White ones, pink ones, cream ones with wax seals from my dramatic college roommate, one absolutely encrusted in unicorn stickers. Every single one, in 50 different hands, said the same thing. For the baby. Every guest wrote my granddaughter a letter, Mom said. Her voice does this thing. 34 years of story time. It fills a space without pushing. Advice, family stories, promises, some recipes, I'm told. She'll read them when she's older, and she'll know exactly who was waiting for her and what they wanted her to know. The garden exhaled. You could feel it, the temperature coming back. Lucas's grandfather, Walt, 91, deaf in one ear, holding his beer like it owed him money, called out that his letter included fishing lessons, the real ones, not the YouTube nonsense. Poppy announced from her post that hers contained very important cookie rules, and that she could say no more. Laughter rolled through the tables, real laughter, the kind that comes when a room realizes it's being rescued. The warmth came all the way back, everywhere except one chair, because Brenda was still standing, glass in hand, and for the first time all day, maybe the first time in 3 years, she looked unsure of the listing. Then my mom reached beneath the stack, all the way to the bottom of the box, and drew out one more envelope, blank. No name on the front. No for the baby, just paper. She carried it across the patio, unhurried, her sensible shoes quiet on the stones, and she set it down on the table directly in front of Brenda, square, like a place setting. I saved this one for you, Mom said. Brenda stared at it. Nobody told me about this. I sent you the same message as everyone else. Quiet. Even the kids were quiet now, the way kids go quiet when they can feel weather. I must have missed it, Brenda said. That happens. My mother reached into her cardigan pocket and produced a pen, clicked it once, and held it out. You can write yours right now. Brenda gave a thin laugh, glanced around the tables for allies, and found 50 polite, waiting faces. Here, in front of everyone, you don't have to read it out loud. And then my mother leaned in, just slightly, just enough, and her voice went soft. Soft like a lullaby. Soft like the voice that gets an entire kindergarten class to put their heads down. Soft in the way that has nothing left to prove and nowhere to be, and is therefore completely inescapable. When your grandchild opens this box one day, what exactly do you want her to remember about you? I have replayed the next 90 seconds more times than I can count. Brenda looked at the envelope. She looked at the pen. She looked once quickly at the faces around the tables. At Walt, who gazed placidly back. At Diane, who studied her own hands. At Lucas, who did not move. At me, 34 weeks pregnant, one hand resting on her only grandchild. She took the pen. For a moment, I actually believed she would sit down and write, and I don't know what I felt about that. Hope, maybe. The stupid weed that it is. She set the pen down on the envelope, very carefully, so it wouldn't roll. Then she gathered her clutch from the back of her chair, settled the enormous hat with both hands, and walked across the patio, down the stone path Lucas had laid 2 summers ago, her heels stamping neat little holes in my lawn, past the arch with the white roses, through the side gate. It clicked behind her. A car door. An engine, expensive and quiet, pulling away up the street. She left our home without another word. Not to Lucas, not to me, not to the 50 guests, or the grandchild in the envelopes, or the woman holding the pen. Nobody chased her. That was the part that undid me a little. Nobody even turned all the way around. My mother picked the blank envelope back up, smoothed it once, and placed it on top of the stack inside the cedar box, lid open. We'll keep it for her, she said to the garden pleasantly. Traditions have room for latecomers. Then she raised her own glass and gave the toast that was supposed to happen. 20 seconds, no notes. To Amy, who worked harder for this baby than anyone will ever know. To Lucas, who eats cake in solidarity. And to our girl. May she spend her whole life surrounded by people who write things down and show up and stay. 50 glasses went up into the gold light. The little boy by the fence raised his bubble wand like a saber. Lucas kissed my temple, and then he went and got me another slice of lemon cake, the corner piece, the one with the frosting rose, and set it in front of me without a word. I ate every bite. It was excellent. The aftermath came in waves, and I'll give it to you the way it arrived. That night, 11 texts from guests, ranging from, "Are you okay?" to "Your mother is my personal hero" to Jess, who wrote simply, "The pen click. I'm having it tattooed." The next morning, Diane called Lucas to report that Brenda felt ambushed and humiliated at a family event, and that Midge had made a spectacle. Lucas, who had rehearsed nothing and needed nothing, said, "Mom, mom made a spectacle at 6:15. Midge handed her a pen. Then he sent his mother one message, which I watched him type at our kitchen table, and which said in full, "Comments about Amy's body are over, permanently." The next conversation starts with an apology to Amy. "We love you, and the door is not locked, but that is the door." 12 days of silence. Then Brenda's reply, which I will quote exactly, because it is a masterpiece of the genre, "I'm sorry if my toast was taken the wrong way." Humor has always been lost on some people. Lucas wrote back one line, "When you're ready to apologize to Amy, we're ready to talk," and put his phone face down, and we went on with the summer. Oh, and one detail I have to give you, because Jess found it, and I'd want someone to give it to me. A week after the shower, Jess scrolled back through the group email thread. 3 weeks before the party, on the same chain where my mother requested the letters, the message Brenda must have missed, there is a reply from Brenda, time-stamped 9:42 a.m., the morning it went out. It says, "Is this in lieu of the registry?" She'd read it, decided it wasn't worth her time, and answered a different question. My mother never mentioned it. She didn't have to. That's the thing I keep learning from Midge. You don't have to prosecute people who convict themselves in writing. Nora Margaret Hartwell arrived on July 18th at 2:47 in the morning, all 7 pounds 1 ounce of her, with Dr. Okafor on call and a cry like a smoke alarm and absolutely no patience, which she comes by honestly on both sides. When my mom held her for the first time, a few hours later in the recovery room, she looked down and said, "Of course," she said. "There you are." Same 3 words. Bookends. I was too tired and too flooded to say anything, so I just watched my mother meet my daughter and thought about a heartbeat on a screen at 162 beats a minute and about how long some people are willing to wait for you. Brenda sent flowers to the hospital. White roses, actually, which I choose to believe was a coincidence. The card said congratulations. It was signed Brenda, not Grandma, just Brenda holding her position. She met Nora for the first time in September at our house, by arrangement, on the terms Lucas had set. She came with a casserole and stayed 40 minutes. She was formal and careful, and she held the baby like something borrowed from a museum. And when she left, she paused at the door, looked at me, a full second, maybe 2, and said, "You look well, full stop. No rider, no clause." I watched her physically decline the second half of her own sentence, and I understood that this was, from Brenda, the white flag, not warmth but a ceasefire. It has held. That's the consequence if you're keeping score. And I know some of you wanted a bigger one, a scene, a reckoning, an exile. What she got instead was proportionate, and somehow worse. She got to keep the family, on the family's terms, in the family's full view. 50 people watched her leave a baby shower rather than answer a kind question. Nobody has ever mentioned it to her. Everybody knows. She walks into every holiday now inside that knowledge. Seated, pleasant, careful. She has not commented on my body, or so help me anyone's, in over a year. And then, in October, the envelope came. Regular mail. Brenda's looping cursive. Inside the outer envelope, a second one, sealed, and on the front, in careful letters, for the baby. Stuck to it, a green sticky note, 4 words, no signature. I didn't know what to say in front of everyone. We didn't open the sealed one. It wasn't ours to open. Lucas drove it over to my mother's house that weekend, and Mom lifted the cedar lid and slid it in with the others in the space she'd been keeping, and that was that. The box lives on the top shelf of Nora's closet now. 82 letters. Fishing lessons, cookie rules, my college roommate's wax seals, a recipe for my late father's terrible chili that 3 separate relatives felt was essential knowledge. Someday, when she's old enough, Nora will open it and meet everyone who was waiting for her before she ever arrived. 81 of those letters were written out of love, freely, the first time they were asked. One of them had to be asked twice, once by email and once by a small, quiet woman holding out a pen in front of 50 witnesses, with the softest voice in the garden and the only question that ever cracked her. When your grandchild opens this box one day, what exactly do you want her to remember about you? I don't know what Brenda finally wrote, but she had to sit alone with that question to write it. And whatever the answer is, my daughter will read it someday, in her grandmother's own hand, filed in cedar, right where it belongs, last.